Full Metal Jacket was released in 1987, directed by Stanley Kubrick and stars Matthew Modine. This is the second Vietnam War film I've reviewed in this very short series, and it seems strange to me that this is the first Stanley Kubrick film that I've reviewed, even though I've been doing these YouTube videos for a while. I think the films of Stanley Kubrick have, rank amongst some of my favourite films of all time. He's a director who's very visionary. I think his films really introduced me to the idea of films being being thematic and being able to evoke metaphors and ideas and literary allusions and things like that. And his films just really fascinate me because they're films that you can do a deep dive in and just discuss what all the different things mean and why different choices were made. And it's clear that the man was motivated by a very strong artistic vision that I think manifested itself by him being extremely meticulous. He would demand countless takes of the same scene. He holds the Guinness World Record for the longest ever film shoot at 400 days. The guy was committed to perfection, and to my mind, it shows in most of his films. Having said that, Full Metal Jacket was a film that when I first saw it a number of years ago, I had very mixed feelings about it. I knew that I liked the first act of the film, where they're at Parris Island in South Carolina with the drill sergeant. I thought that was great. It's funny almost. It plays more like a dark comedy in parts. But the second and third act of the film, which could be combined into one, but I think there's a second and third act. It kind of deteriorated. It didn't feel as interesting to me. And overall, I think the film felt a bit disjointed. The pacing felt a bit off, and it just felt like it was conceived strangely because it is I would agree with that now actually, because it is a strangely conceived film. Very different tones I think run through the different acts of the film. But it's a film that has definitely grown on me over the years. I like it more now than I ever have. And I understand that's true for other people as well. It is a film that grows on you, because I think when you first watch it, you really don't know what to expect. And I think the finished product it's a classically Kubrick film. It has all of his sort of director sort of signatures and trademarks. From the long sort of dolly takes, to the characters that are undergoing psychological turmoil, with the 1,000-yard stare. Visually, it's a very striking sort of matter-of-fact film. I always wonder why Stanley Kubrick even bothered to have a director of photography on his films, because to me most of the films just seem kind of, even though they've got different cinematographers, they all seem united in their visual and directorial style. I wonder if Stanley Kubrick just did most of the sort of lighting and camera work himself. So the end product of Full Metal Jacket, it's a technically marvellous film. I really love the matter-of-fact cinematography that's going on, because it's not particularly elaborate, but it's meaningful in the sense that what you're seeing, the scenes of war, the scenes of the boot camp are very raw, and I think having that is the best way to evoke the feelings you're wanting to do. Where the film gets the most praise is obviously the boot camp scene at the beginning of the film. As I said earlier, some of it plays like a dark comedy. You feel sorry for these recruits getting all of this drilled into them. But the dark comedy elements, I think, persist later throughout the film as well. The main character, Matthew Modine, his character's name is Joker. He's making all these little jokes throughout the film. His helmet says, born to kill. He wears a peace badge. There's a lot of sort of quirky things like that throughout the film that I think threw me off when I first saw it. I didn't really understand what they were going for, but I think it shows. The film has it's not. I don't think it's anti-war. I don't think it's pro-war. I don't think that's the point of it. But you do get a sense for Kubrick's personal opinion, if you will. I think you can tell that he kind of, and I think this is true from interviews that he did, that he viewed the war as mostly just like a farce. Not like, it wasn't like, frothing at the mouth, this is a dreadful thing, or this is a great thing. It was just like, this is ridiculous. I don't know how this has ever came to be. It's just so pointless and such a waste of human life. And I think that's classic sort of Kubrick philosophy, and also even just sort of sensibility and sense of humor. Because you see that through a lot of his films. He likes to sort of mock. He likes to mock authority. If you look at Doctor Strangelove, or even A Clockwork Orange, I guess he does like to poke fun at things like that. And I think actually that's the tone of the film for me. It is kind of it's a cynical film. It's kind of mocking authority, and it turns all the soldiers kind of become automatons throughout the film. They lose their individuality when they go to the boot camp. At the end of the film, the ending was very, I guess at the time, was quite controversial. Spoilers, I'll put a spoilers label in this video, but basically the ending revolves around this one shooter, like a North Vietnamese shooter that's in the tower of this building, that's able to pick off the Americans with ease. And the main character, Matthew Modine's character, goes up, shoots her, and then kills her essentially. And it's really, really dark, because you expect, a traditional narrative like this would be, he's your hero, he finds some humanity, and he doesn't kill, he decides not to kill at the end, but that's not this film. It's quite a dark ending, because here's our protagonist, here's our well, okay, yeah, the film never presents them as heroes, but this is our protagonist, and he just kills someone, in cold blood. And it's quite it's such a confusing film, because you've got scenes that are like that are very dark and very distressing. The scene where the boot camp where Vincent D'Onofrio's character commits suicide. You've got that dark stuff, but then it's undercut by a sharp cut, and then there's like a sort of classic 60s 70s pop song. They start playing the Rolling Stones, and it's almost as if to say it's Kubrick's sense of humour, I think. That I guess in the 80s, it was quite soon after Vietnam, they had to be a bit below the radar with. But it's there, it's clear to see, and I think that's what kind of elevates the film. But having said that, I know that there's lots of interpretations of this, as there is with every Kubrick film. some people have applied like Jungian psychological analysis to it. Some people have talked about, how some people have argued that it is a profoundly anti-war film. They've looked at all this symbolism and things like that. I don't think I've really sat with the film and done a deep dive like that, except maybe in a very cursory way. Apocalypse Now, I think, is the much more blatantly sort of symbolic and sort of metaphorical film, and I'll get into that in the next review that I do. But Full Metal Jacket has quite a lot of that, and I think it deserves I think it deserves respect. I think it's a good film. The performances, I guess R. Lee Ermey as the drill sergeant is, one of the most famous sort of war film performances of all time. It's deeply, deeply iconic, to the point where he's playing the character again in like Toy Story. Is this like really foul-mouthed drill sergeant is just trying to dehumanize these cadets, because it's what they need for going into war. There is one notion I had watching the film, and this kind of goes against the Kubrick thinking that the whole thing was a farce. It was something that Apocalypse Now alludes to as well, where it's like, the Americans could have easily won this war if they had better soldiers. And I think that's what he was going for, with Private Pile and Vincent D'Onofrio's character. Where it's like, yeah, you've got these guys that are from like Middle America. They're not born to be killers. They're not born to be soldiers. They're just plucked from their high school or whatever and given a gun. And I thought that was an interesting sort of angle to take. So he's poking fun at a lot of different aspects of the American sort of military machine, as it was during the Vietnam War. And when I say make fun, I don't mean like I don't mean like in a completely disrespectful way. It is just a sort of irreverent, it is his sort of classic humour. Very sardonic, very, very dry. Um, and yeah, it's a well made film. I think I mentioned the technical aspects earlier. The production design to this film is phenomenal. I mean, I have to give this film full credits. It was, you start the film in South Carolina, you go to Vietnam. The film was entirely shot in the UK, which I find crazy. Like the South Carolina was an RAF base somewhere in the south of England. The streets of Hue City in Vietnam are just like a soundstage somewhere in Britain. All of the streets that were supposed to be from Vietnam, there aren't many jungle locations, which is quite telling in the film. But a lot of the industrial stuff is just sets, and I think that's absolutely incredible because this film definitely does have a much more um, industrial feel to Vietnam than other Vietnam War films. I mean, there aren't. I mean, aside from like you see scattered like palm trees and stuff. I mean, in the film does feel tropical. All of the characters look like they're in a place that's really hot and humid. But it's just somewhere in Britain. The skies over them are skies here, which I find incredible. I couldn't believe that this film was shot entirely here. So production design deserves full props. I mean, that is no mean feat to make somewhere in Britain look like somewhere in the Far East. It's a tremendous film. It's a meaningful film. It's quite odd actually because it's under 2 hours. And these war films usually, I mean, they're usually epics. Usually even Kubrick films like if you think Spartacus and what have you. I mean, they were like pushing the 3 hour mark. But this seems fairly self-contained. And I don't know if that's what maybe that's one of the issues I had when I first watched it. I expected it to be more of an Apocalypse Now epic kind of thing. Although, having said that, I think the film's paced very well. Actually, I mean, I can understand people finding it disjointed because the first act is so different to the second and third. But I actually think that in terms of pacing, it doesn't feel like a long film at all. It feels. I mean, it's a 2 hour film, and I'd say it feels about that, which is good. It doesn't drag, even though the third act of the film the second and third act are both very, by the numbers, they're not very elaborate in what's going on in the story. It's basically just get from point A to B, whilst these things are going on, whilst we're being shot at. And we've got some character things going on in the background, but I think it's paced fine. I think it's the performances are all good. They get Kubrick obviously got what he wanted from these actors. It's a bit of a 2001 scenario. I mean, it's clear that these actors weren't picked because they're the most charismatic, they're the most memorable. They're picked because they can evoke the themes that Kubrick wanted to evoke. So I think overall, my opinion of Full Metal Jacket has evolved over the years. I respect this film quite a lot. I don't think it's Kubrick's best. I would probably rank it maybe fifth or sixth out of Kubrick's films overall. But it is a very sort of thought provoking film that has like a very dark sort of sense of humour that you can poke through. And I think that's, for me, discovering that was the hook for this film, and it's what elevated it for me. Just seeing that there's that sort of dark, sly sense of humour going on, just combined with all of the the set pieces and the performances and the production design, technical aspects. All of that was great. It's Kubrick. I mean, you can't fault that stuff. Yeah, I am recommending Full Metal Jacket. It's not as good as The Deer Hunter. Yes, The Deer Hunter is what you go to for a more character-driven Vietnam War film. Full Metal Jacket is more of a sort of sardonic take on it, and I'm going to give Full Metal Jacket 81 out of 100. I actually I went to an exhibition last year when I was in London, which was on the films of Stanley Kubrick. Tons of props and original things from Stanley Kubrick films. I'll include some stills just now of some of the some of the Full Metal Jacket related props. It was a really great exhibition, really, really worth the price of the ticket. I really loved it. And yeah, Full Metal Jacket gets a strong recommendation from me.